Welcome everyone. I'm Richie Brayman with the University of Georgia's Center for Urban Agriculture. The center supports this webinar technology for UGA Extension and would like to introduce you to the host of this webinar series. Dr. Dan Suter is a professor of urban pest management in the Department of Entomology at the University of Georgia. He's located on the UGA Griffin campus. Dr. Suter has worked with the pest control industry since 1987. Dan would like to welcome you and introduce you to our speaker.
Well, thank you, Richie. Dr. Martinez-Espinoza is a professor in the Department of Plant Pathology here at the University of Georgia and based here on the Griffin campus, and he's been with UGA for 19 years. Alfredo is an extension specialist working on the development and transfer of information of new and recurring diseases of turfgrass, small grains, and forage grasses. He holds a Ph.D. from the Department of Plant Pathology in Montana at Montana State University in Bozeman. And Alfredo has published 4 books, numerous book chapters, over 350 articles in scientific journals and extension bulletins and trade journals, just a very prolific author, and has presented over 350 presentations to a professional county and scientific groups. Well, welcome, Dr. Martinez. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Dan. We'll be talking about the importance of fall activities in disease control in turf. Just when you thought you were done and all the activities that you have, actually fall is very important for disease prevention, disease control, disease management. Especially, and you're going to see now, and if you watch careful for those lawn care companies and things like that, it would be, for example, large patch. Right now, with the conditions that we just had with Irma and other weather events, this disease is about to, or actually now going full speed. So again, fall is important for disease management, and this is important for what happens. Weather is everything on disease. Disease is very weather dependent. We have to know what are the susceptible periods and weather patterns. And here in this slide, exactly we're having, for example, in the summer is when you're fertilizing and doing other things, but it's important to know what are the areas in which is more susceptible. For example, this is in warm season grasses. In cool season grasses, this is the importance for have a good growth. So tall fescue managers, bent grass managers, things like that are pretty much taking opportunity of this part. But it's in warm season grasses which it pretty much attends to what we're having. Let's say North Carolina South. This is very important right now. So everything that we do, everything that the fertility, the moisture management, the cutting, all that which we think that is a chore that we need to do, that's very important and will have a direct impact on disease. So fall is important for fertility, and if we say, well, you know, now we're going to be not putting too much nitrogen, but again, let's see what's going on levels of potassium levels. Again, this is very important for that, and everything is based on what we do. Then is the right species for the right side. That may be the fall when you say, okay, we may have to do an assessment of the right variety. Do I have an area in which now Bermuda grass is too shady or is not growing well? And then we need to have the evaluation of that particular site, because that site will have an impact on disease in what later on what you're going to be having problems with, or not. Maybe I'm putting centipede or San Agustin too far north, or tall fescue too far, you know, going south. So again, that's very important. Although we have new varieties and so on, then we have to be what is the right place for that particular variety that we have. Right now, we have a lot of varieties that are coming up with different disease tolerance, heat tolerance, and so on. So this is very important for that. And you all know this, but it's very important that I kind of point out on this, because I receive 500 samples a year in regarding this, and a big part of that is due to either wrong location or abiotic stress, things like that. And then we have other aspects in IPM. Everything has to be combined, all this, and then at the end, yes, we have some issues. We can have some aspects of chemical control, but again, remember, that's only the last resource. That's only what pesticides or fungicides, for example, in this case, are expensive. Fungicides are only work for a certain amount of time, and so on. Yes, they are very good, and they are there to help you out. But again, everything has to rely on what we do right at every day. One thing that I would like to go through a few things first, and then we're going to be talking about specific diseases, but really want to impinge in what are you doing? What is very important? Everything that you do is very important, and not only for now, but for later on. And sometimes in disease is very different than weeds and or insects. Insects, you see them. Weeds, you see them, and you go there and you pretty much destroy them, put out herbicide, and so on. With disease, is about prevention. It's about not having that particular disease, because by the time, in many cases, by the time you see a disease or the symptoms, the infection already has taken place months ago. And also, you have to train, or you have to inform your client about that's something that you do in disease. Let's say right now, September, October, you are not going to see much of what you did until March or April or even May. However, if you didn't do it right now, you have missed a big opportunity, and also it may be worse later on as you see that particular disease. So again, now we have a lot of issues knowing your site. Maybe it is an area with that particular client that the irrigation kind of holds into that particular site, or you have problems with low areas, or that particular site is very shady, and so on. So those are the things that you need to address, and having a solid knowledge of the turf species and varieties. Do I know that, for example, centipede is going to struggle right in the springtime? Do I have to do something in order to cultivate that better? I know, for example, if I'm doing some social grass is very prone to large patch. So again, those are the things that you have to do to know in order to avoid potential disease activity. And again, we have now a lot of techniques that you can share with drones and on all this other things in areas that require continuous monitoring. Train your guys about go and look for any different thing, the sea of color, yellowing, things like that. Fertility is very important. I cannot stress more the importance of fertility on disease, especially, for example, low potassium right now. It's key to avoid leaf spots, for example. Dollar spot is really directly related to nitrogen and potassium deficiency. If you have rust, that means that, or if you've been diagnosed with rust, you have a low nitrogen, bipolaris leaf spot, and we're going to see in a minute. It's going to be almost in a direct relationship to potassium deficiencies, again, and so on. So this should be addressed based on a soil test. This is the time to do a soil test and see what's going on, and you cannot prepare for what is actually coming next spring. Soil. Well, soil, it's very important, but I would like to, besides the physical characteristics on compaction, on thatch buildup, and is it sandy, is it leaches too fast, or no, doesn't leach at all. So that's important because that the humidity is directly contributing to disease. But I really also like to emphasize, when you get the fertility or the nutrient analysis, pH is very important, and see that there are some diseases that are higher activity at different pHs. Also, pH Yes, you may have plenty of manganese or magnesium, but if the pH is too high, those nutrients may be held and therefore will not be available to the plant. So again, all these important that are very important, and those are the things that you need to be addressing for that. Diseases are really and truly related to either extremes in irrigation or in humidity, either too much or too little. If you have too much, of course, have the increase the possibility of root diseases, sulfide accumulation due to the lack of oxygen, and therefore the roots are disintegrated, are rotting, and so on. So again, that's very important. But not only in the soil, actually in the foliage is where disease, more the foliar diseases actually have, and humidity, I cannot stress more the importance of fertility and humidity, especially in the foliar, because that favors the sporulation of the pathogen or of the fungal disease, and contributes to other things. Of course, if you don't have enough water, then we have a lot of problems regarding weakened turf, loss of turgidity, diminish of photosynthesis, desiccation, and also, and more importantly, is that, for example, it diminishes the fungicide activity. So you're putting a fungicide thinking that it's going, it may not be translocated as good. So therefore, will be something that you need to be aware of that. So we have fertility, we have pH, soil physical characteristics and chemical characteristics, and humidity. There, they are very important for the disease development. We already talked about a little bit of the wetness, the foliar aspect, humidity on disease. It doesn't take much, but a good dew to really kick up some diseases. Right now, for example, we have all the condition specifics for dollar spot, which we're going to be talking in a minute. We do the light watering, and we really don't go deep down to the soil, and that extended periods of irrigation or humidity will have an direct impact on disease. There are other factors. Mutation is just basically how a plant kind of sweats, and quotation marks. It produces a lot of water and produces all these little drops of water, which at the end, it actually is more important because it has sugars and other things that actually going to be contributing to the disease development. So, and all these factors favor the disease development. Many of the fungal diseases we have, produces penetration and things like that. So again, it's very important on that part. Mowing, say, well, this mowing, we don't really pay too much attention to mowing, but it's very important on disease. This is the right height of cut. We have, for example, some issues in which there's some scalping. Scalping takes a long time to recover if it's done in the right time. Frequency. Do I go too far with a client, and then when I go, it's too the mowing height is too low, or when I go there and it's not the third rule to cut, because that has a relationship in disease. For example, if you cut too low, then the expansion is kind of goes, the turf goes horizontal, and then it produces that particular dense turf, which it produces then, for example, large patch. But they also, in the same token, if you go too high, then what it does, it produces a lot of, it keeps humidity, and therefore that also brings that disease. So again, that would be very important. Sharpness of the blades, it's, you know, things that we have, especially we do this in golf course scenarios and so on, in which that needs to be very, very important, but also in lawn care, because that you are creating an injury that is going to be, again, maybe pathogens we can get into it. Compaction, we have and goes with pattern. For example, we do a lot of the same mowing pattern, change the mowing pattern, go north, go south the next time, and so on. Because if you're doing the same pattern, that would create with the weight of the mower or a few things you are spreading and so on. Like, for example, if you have an area which is already affected with a disease, and a foliar disease, and if you're going to be mowing and from highly infected areas to non-infected areas, so like, for example, dollar spot, that may be transferring to that. So again, that's important for that. So even things like, well, you know, mowing, is very important on disease. Their chemical control, we already talked about. Yes, they are good fungicide. There are many of them that are very or available for that control. We have, for example, but we have to be careful about the proper fungicide selection. Do we have to which pathogen am I controlling? Am I controlling right at the roots, the crown, or is it foliar? All that is important, because then we have to deposit that particular fungicide to the right place. What is the pathogen? What is the rate? Do I have to go at a higher rate or lower rate depending on that? Sometimes economics matter, but sometimes they actually, you need to go with the highest rate at the right time. Here, for example, I just put what is the preventative of a curative. For example, if you know that you have a large patch and you are going to be doing have a history on that site, you may have to go preventatively because the disease is there and it's going to be waiting for only the right conditions to develop. Here I'm just exemplifying, for example, what I did in some dollar spot. This is on bentgrass, but it can be applied to any of that, in which I did a preventative application of a product in which was 0.18 ounces, and so I did it with before that I applied the disease. While the other one is a curative. In the curative, I did 3 times the same rate, and you can see the equal amount. So you're spending 3 times more of a product, money, and environment. If you could have done a preventative application or just when the disease was starting. So again, that's important. So timing of application, it's important. We're going to be, and then chemical group. Do I use a lot of the same group? They may have some issues with resistance, and so again, that's important. Maybe we have failures in control. It may not be because we're going to be because we didn't, that fungicide is not good, or we did a bad application. It may be because it's already resistance to that. Foliar diseases. Let's go and see. So I want to go back up a little bit in here. So really what I would like to, if nothing from this seminar, what I would like to do is that really everything that you do, fertility, mowing, irrigation, all those things are ways of factors that are directly involved in disease prevention. And then you have to be in a more proactive type on that particular site, that history, have like the doctors have, already the patients, you have your site, and I did this, I did that, but also this is prone to this is prone to that, so that we can address for that, and you will have a happy customer. Let's going to go talk about some foliar diseases. They are going on right now, and those diseases are very important. And see on the top. So one of them is dollar spot. Everybody knows about dollar spot. You have not seen dollar spot is because you have not been paying attention. But very, very susceptible cultivars. If you have Bermuda grass, if you have bentgrass, or if you're there cool season or warm season, this is a very ubiquitous disease. You will see and as the infection notices, it's you will see some real lesions on the foliar area, and if you go early in the morning, you can see that white cast of which actually is mycelium. Mycelium is how a fungus develops and grows and attacks, collecting water, and you see, or humidity, like in this particular that all that is just water which had been adhered to the mycelium, and therefore give you that white aspect on that. And if you go and if you see some lesions, when you see that much mycelium or white-ish web of things, and you don't see lesions, then it's something else. It may be a spider or something, but you will see lesions by that time. Of course, they are, everybody knows it produces small circles of about 2 inches in diameter. That's why it's called a dollar spot, like a silver dollar. And it's specifically important in the fall or in the springtime, as when the growth of oilworm season grasses, for example, are very going down, and therefore the plant is not as, let's say, healthy, or the carbohydrates and things like that, they are diminishing, and so on. So this one is more susceptible, and also it really impinges with the fertility is going down, and humidity in some cases, hurricanes or weather events that produce that humidity, that would be important. Infection requirements, exactly like we're having today. So we are having cool nights, say below 60s or mid 60s, and then we have warm days, early spring, late fall. Leaf wetness, so we have the dew coming, and then we have overcast. They'll have lingering weather events like hurricanes or other things, and then at the time we have low potassium, for example. Or we're getting the last nitrogen application, therefore we have some issues there. So right now is the time to scout for it. It's very easy to spot, it's very easy to look, and therefore it will be easy to react to it. And as soon as you start seeing, preventing, you know that you have Bermuda grass which has been on that particular site for X, Y, and Z reason that is not up to fertility, then you will have some issues there. So what do you have to do? Basically manage the nitrogen levels, but mostly the potassium levels at this point. Maybe nitrogen level will be in springtime, but fertility is very important. Avoid drought stress. This is important because it actually is more prone to have dry soils, but wet foliage. It actually promote the disease. But in general, humidity in the upper part, in the canopy of the turf, will be a trigger for disease. Increases in again, all these three, for example, that are over here. Water, avoid extended moisture, and increase it. All is regarding to humidity. So if you see that, then that should address something. Remove dew in the morning. Maybe you have the something to get all that dew from it. So this is important. But fertility is key. Because the disease is so important, so ubiquitous. Actually, dollar spot is the disease in where more money is spent in control, in golf course scenarios, in sport fields, and so on. There are a myriad of fungicides available for that. Here we have in this slide what we do in Georgia. Every year we put, and I know in every university, the extension area in your local university and the state should have what is recommended, and the sites and the rates and so on. But there's a myriad fungicide. I just put out some that are more used. You can see there are some that we have some DMIs like trimethoprim, or we have some propiconazole, for example, but we have also some benzimidazoles like thiophanate methyl, for example, and some others. The only one that you don't see here are the strobilurin products, strobilurin fungicides. Strobilurin fungicides do not control dollar spot, or if they do, they control it very minor way. So again, you should be either a combination of those or something else. But again, I mean, we have in our 2017 pest control, probably I have there 2 pages or 3 pages of dollar spot fungicide that you can choose from that, and it's according to, you know, every budget and so on. So everybody knows dollar spot, everybody's familiar with it. You have it, get it before you get to the point where it's going to create too much damage, and also go have inoculum for the next year. Right now too, what is going on is Bipolaris leaf spot and crown rot. That's a leaf spot that you can actually act as a crown rotter. It's basically mostly on Bermuda grass, but it can be also in cool season grasses, especially if you're overseeding sport fields that are overseeding, or, you know, going to this disease is very important. But on Bermuda grass, it goes to normal Bermuda grass, and it creates basically some issue there. So again, it's important. You will see, contrary to dollar spot, it's widespread. A lot of different thinning and spots, because every little spot that you see in this area, it will produce spores, and that means that it's going to produce those little kind of, we call it quotation mark seeds, and they will spread. This is very different from failed to mention in dollar spot. Dollar spot do not or does not produce spores. It has produced only mycelium. Therefore, the difference in this one and dollar spot is that dollar spot has to be carried out on little pieces of grass or so on. In this one, water, your mowing, your shoes, etc., can travel and can put that disease actually out and spread. So if you have an area which looks like this, and then you're mowing in that direction, you're going to be spreading all the disease. So again, that's important. Or if you see this disease, you will need to test for the potassium levels. Usually these indicate low potassium levels, either by they are not sufficient or for the pH or so on. But it's a clear relationship between leaf wetness and potassium levels, so should address those and so on. And sometimes the inoculum, the amount of disease or the spores are so high that it can be very, you know, no matter what you do, they will be there. Therefore, it will be the need for that. So if you see, you start early vigilance, diagnosis and fertility. When I say diagnosis, let's say you are not diagnosing disease. Let's take the sample. Most of the universities have a diagnostic clinic. They usually do very economic, or you have labs that you can send the sample to. Here in the University of Georgia, every county you can talk to them and submit a sample and so on. Therefore, you will have an accurate diagnosis of what to do, and then we actually tell you what will be the course of action. So it's a good strategy to be good friends with your county agent, with your university personnel, so that you can talk to them and say, you have this, and can I send you a sample, things like that, because early diagnosis, early vigilance is key for disease prevention and control. Look at the phosphorus and potassium levels. Avoid putting too much nitrogen at this point. Again, this is getting late, and if you haven't done or quit in putting some of the nitrogen, then you are putting the odds against you. So again, this is important. Again, water management. And we always, again, this is a recurring theme: water management, irrigation, humidity. And again, I use lightweight basically just because of the stress. So if you have a very heavy mower and a lot, you're just creating a stress, creating rupture of the plant and so on. Again, and if in this area, it's, let's say you're managing a sport fields, again, you may have to avoid too much going on in that area and so on, so in order to avoid the spread, and also to have that grass to recover. The same thing, we have a lot of fungicides that are, or I've got good variety of that. Look for your extension university turfside guide and see which one it's you can use. There's many of those. One that you can use and is very efficacious, for example, on leaf spot, it's iprodion. Any fungicide has iprodion in it. And the only problem with iprodion is that you cannot use it on residential areas. But if you're managing a golf course, if you're managing a sport fields, and then that may be something. But here is very important to have, for example, a strobilurin product, or the dicarboxamides are very efficacious in controlling the disease. So again, that would be something to that. If you have a really heavy epidemic of that, then that would be something to go with. Again, talk to your local extension turf disease person, the diagnostics, your county agent. There's some new ones. I put this one here because I always forget what's actually going. But there's some that hated action, which is a combination of azoxystrobin plus acylbenzolar. There are other like Brisway, which is a combination of azoxystrobin plus difenconazole. This one, Brisway, is rather new and also very can use, I believe, in every setting. So again, just check on the label. The label is the law. So every time that you do this, this is very important. And I should do this just from the get-go. Even if whenever I say, you know, the label should be the one that you need to be addressing and using for that. But there is some aspects on those and where you can use it and so on. These are probably the newest on that if you have a leaf spot issue. But actually, one of the, and I would like to defer more time to the crown and disease. You know, in foliar diseases, it's up to a certain point kind of easy to diagnose. You can see the lesions, you can see the dieback, and so on. In crown or root diseases, it is not as easy. Sometimes it requires some more actually detective work, what is actually going on, and so on. So it is very important for that to address. And sometimes when you see the disease, the infection has already come and, you know, going, let's say 15, 21 days prior to that on crown diseases. In some root diseases, I mean, it has been probably a few months back. So large patch, that's the disease that I would like really, if nothing from this seminar, to emphasize the action that needs to be done right now. And you see here the infection that has happened in September or October. So if you have had an infection that happened in April, May, or so on, and you have a history on that particular site, you must go with a preventative application on that. That will save you a lot of trouble for next year, and also many issues, and a good window in which you can control. Again, as you see here, for example, when the turf is just coming out of dormancy, it will be another time where the large patch can be active, but you have very little opportunity to do. You have to go curative on this area then, and preventative. So again, it's important for that September, October large patch for that. And the large patch, as the name says, it is pretty much pretty large areas which are thin. You can see some yellowing. It actually has some turf within the patch, but is very thrifty, and that's because it actually doesn't take the or is not attack too much the root system, but the crown area. The roots at a certain point, it looks fine root system, but is the crown area. Can spread an area from, I mean, a few feet. It's also some cases, let's see if I have it here. Oh, no, I don't have it. This is one of my areas in which I have a zoysia grass, a toro. It's actually experimental area in which, and you see today some leyland cypresses which are kind of in between this area and a bentgrass area that I have. And this area here, it's has some shade, it has longer humidity, and so on. Therefore, would be a lot of large patch on those areas. So look for those areas that have received very little light, they stay wet for a longer time. And if you have zoysia and it's springtime or fall, is the time to scout for it. This disease, it infects the sheets and cow the plant again, and it's important to be friends with a county agent or all that, because Rhizoctonia, it's very easy to identify in the microscope and so on. So therefore, it will take a few minutes for us, county agent specialized, to see what happens if that is what it is. So what do we need to do right now? Pretty much early detection with these weather patterns that we have, and we probably want to have with this new hurricane that is lingering. All those, although we don't really have all that impact, it may be all the clouds and so on, which is important for disease prevention. So scout. Now, if you have had a history on that particular client that had a disease, then you must act now. Quit nitrogen fertilization, promote, if you want to do some fertilization, do a 0-0 something on the fertilizer, or try to address some of the K, and then all these three or four areas that I have here, it's due to water management, and sometimes we can work on those when we can, so avoid overwatering. Allow some time to dry the canopy and so on. But this reduced thatch, if you are having some thatch areas, if you cut and it's getting soft and spongy, then that means that you have excessive thatch. Remember, this disease leaves that exactly where you can at the ground level. So that creates a perfect environment for the disease to develop. So that's important. Reduce thatch and so on. So if you have that and you cannot do much right now, maybe during this spring, if and when it goes dormant, maybe some scalping or some way to take all that that kind of all that organic matter out. Again, remember, I said it's only way that when it's not actively growing and so on. But any way that you can, a dethatching procedure will be efficacious. This is probably in Rhizoctonia where I had the most chemicals or fungicides to do that. So go and check your local. See, for example, this is a one area that, or one example of 2 pages, for example, what I put every year. But again, this is for your particular in local information, and you will see how many the actual product, what are the names that you can actually see, and the rate and so on. Therefore, you can have wherever the most efficacious. Let's say you have 2 brown patch and Rhizoctonia, then there will be some ways in which you can combine some of those. But if you address the factor that we have talked previously, you will be better off, and you may not need any product. Just to reiterate here, and in contrast with, for example, dollar spot, some of the strubilurin products are very efficacious. We have many of those, but here the key is fall and springtime. But fall is the prime time to do that. We have several publications. Actually, in all of these diseases that I talked to, we have several publications that you can actually access and look more information if you require. But this is on some of the products that are there. So just to back up a minute, large patch. Remember, we say brown patch. We usually talked about tall fescues, warm season, cool season grasses. Large patch, we kind of say to warm season grasses. I say that because we'll be doing some of this product from brown patch, but in tall fescue, like during the summer here in Georgia, it may be different from other areas or so. So it would be in some of those. So root diseases would be going. Now we're going down on those. So, for example, spring dead spot. This is spring dead spot, and the disease. This is the difference. The spring dead spot, you will have, as the name says, you have a dead spot down in the springtime. Now, this is a little bit different. Do I have a little basically dead patch? And with nothing in the middle. In cases you have something in the middle, but that will die later. So, and also a very sharp contrast between dead and new, or basically unaffected grass. This, what it tells you is that the infection already has happened, and we're gonna go through, but if the key, if you have or not spring dead spot, oh, and by the way, spring dead spot is mostly on Bermuda grass. The key will be, is this area, did it green up and then die, or it never greened up? If it greened up and then die, then it's not spring dead spot. This disease, the infection happened already in, let's say, a few months ago, and then it is dead now because it will kill it. The frost kill it. So we'll go through that. Mostly 99% of the time will be in Bermuda grass only. We have found it in zoysia grass. It's very, very rare. So if you have a patch in the springtime and you have Bermuda grass and you are in the transition zone, basically that you get a good frost and so on, North Carolina, South Carolina, Oklahoma, and all that area, Georgia, and North Georgia, then it may be a spring dead spot. Again, it's because the infection happens in the fall. I have a very sensitive mouse here that goes pretty quick. Here, infection of the root in the fall, that means now. That means October. Then it should be and then it is killed by the low temperature. So if we have had some issues like or some winter like we had, let's say this past winter, in which all we really never went dormant, so therefore we had some part that we didn't see much of spring dead spot because of that, but we saw a continuous infection of large patch. Straw color, severe. Every single Bermuda grass cultivar that we have pretty much are susceptible. There's there's some tolerance to cold, but to the disease, very, very little. I mean, it can devastate areas completely. Now, the difference here is that the best diagnostic part is that all the features for spring dead spot is look at the roots. The roots have to be if you take a sample, for example, that is between this area, the area that is already infected will be dark, black, destroyed, and so on. Remember, in large patch, the roots are not affected as much. This is an effect here on the stolons, and the roots are totally dark. So it will be something to look if you have ever doubt of if that is what is happening. I mean, the infection, the symptom is pretty obvious. Spring then will go also, all the growth in the springtime, it will come from the outside. Therefore, you know, do your normal weed control, because if you see that area, if it's invaded by other type of weeds or things like that, then it would be have more problem for this Bermuda grass to go and fill out that area. This is some trial that I have here in Griffin, in TIF sport. We've been working on that. Basically, temperatures in September, October will occur the infection. Then if it's wet, like we have now, and then we have a cold winter, you know, it freezes, then we have the disease. Now, here we see something important. The disease is more problematic if you have higher or very alkaline soils. So above 6.3, 6.4, the disease will be very more problematic. Symptoms just showed in the spring, not much you can do at this time. And that's what people hate when they come with a sample to me and they say, well, it's springtime. I say, well, there's not much you can use in the things of fungicides. Although we are changing this, we actually have this very data in which now we can do something. But until we have more concrete data, fall is the time to do it. So again, do your whatever you do. Do it properly, and try to have that, you know, the good growth and things like that. Reduce nitrogen application in late summer and fall. This is again, it maintains the later you put the nitrogen, the more you will kind of have to the grass will stand. And it may have it increases the chances of winter killing, increases the chances of other things. So again, that's very important. pH. So if you can do anything about the pH, that would be something. If you need to do maybe address any deficiencies in potassium, and anything you can do to promote good growth. I mean, and reduce soil compaction and so on. We have many different several fungicides that actually now labeled for spring dead spot. Go again to your normal county agent or extension for that, but anything that has, for example, any strobilurin, any at this time, for example, in DMI, such as propiconazole, things like that, actually labeled for those or that are good. Again, check the labels, check on some of those. And we have done a lot of work on this, and the timing is of extreme importance for that. Just to finish up here in a few minutes, right now, what is going to go on with fairy due to this, you know, wet fall and things that happen, then is when the mushrooms start popping out, and I've seen some right now actually outside our doors here. And if you see fairy ring, that means that it's fairy rings are wood rotting fungi. So everything relies, if you have those, that means that you have organic matter. There's some organic matter in these areas, which actually the thatch is too thick. There's some stumps or something that is trying being degraded. So that's usually fairy ring why is coming up. Golf courses, for example, they start having some issues because of the thatch. There's no good degradation of the clippings and so on. Is not. This is the problem. Oh, let's see. I don't have a. Here, I want to kind of overemphasize it because this would be, it's produced by many species. So it's you know what, I did something and it actually worked. It may not work in your area because there are maybe another different species that are actually more. So really, what I would like to emphasize, and these are some symptoms that you see, is clear rings. Some cases you don't see the basidiocarps, which are the mushrooms, but you can also see. But this is the deal. This is not an infection of the plant. This is something that happens due to the mycelium creating hydrophobic areas, and therefore and sometimes producing some toxins that are going to kill that area. So this is really relies directly on impact on how you're going to control it, because really you have to, if you do a lot of spiking, aeration, and so on, that may suffice, and you know you don't need a fungicide treatment. Maybe use a wetting agent or something to actually try to break all this area, which is basically hydrophobic area. So therefore that would be something to do. It may be a fungicide, especially on golf courses. I don't think it's required for any lawn care part. But if you do, I mean, the issue is that the fungicide will need to be and go on this area. So that's what I have right now for this seminar. Really, what I would like to emphasize is that that it's important to do right now. Dollar spot, Bipolaris leaf spot, we have a large patch, and control of spring dead spot would be something to look for and to try to address of the issue. But really what I like to point out in IPM is that everything that you do is very important. Everything that you do in cultivation, in sanitation, in fertility, in so on, then it would be something to do. And we are here. Please just contact with your local county agent, contact us, and if we can be of help, we're here to help you and see what we can do for you.
All right, very good. I got you, Alfredo. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, it was very good, Alfredo. Thank you very much. Very good presentation. There were a couple questions that came in. I had a couple questions here from my perspective, but this is anybody that's in the audience right now. If you have questions, now's a good time to get it from the expert. But I had a question here, Alfredo. I'm a novice here when it comes to fungal diseases and diseases in general. But are all visible fungal pathogens harmful to turfgrass? So if you see something growing and it's off-colored or it's highly visible, is it going to kill the grass necessarily?
No, it's a good question. You can have to see exactly what. That's why you can contact your local county agent and see what's happening. But for example, we have slime molds. Slime molds is a highly visible and kind of showy type. For example, we didn't talk about that, but it's not a big. It's only aesthetic problem, is not really an issue, but what it tells you is that something else there is going on, and you have addressed it, either humidity or that or organic matter. So again, it depends on what it is, but I would like to emphasize that disease is not the norm. Disease it's what comes after, because of an underlying factor on that, either fertility, humidity, nutrient availability, and so on. So again, some of them are very easy to spot, some of them are not. Remember, many, as I say, 500 samples, let's say 40%, 30% are not due to disease. So again, it can be due to something else that is not actively, pathogenic. I don't know if that answers your question, but
yeah, definitely does. As human beings, we see something in a turfgrass that we want to be, beautiful. We think that it's harmful. So I think that's where that question came from. I think you already answered this question, Alfredo, but I was asking if you could comment on fall nitrogen requirements and its impact on spring diseases. I think you did cover this. What should somebody be doing right now? Sounded like you should be laying low with the nitrogen.
That's very important because a lot of, especially we tend to feed, and we want to say, okay, we want to show the client that we're doing something, and somebody, you know, sometimes we have it scheduled those things, but now remember, this is getting too late, and now the nitrogen availability and so on, it will actually extend the life of the, going to be greener for longer time, and things like that. And actually that is when the disease, large patch, spin there spot, and so on, it's will actually promote some of that disease. If you want to do, maybe address some of the potassium levels and some other fertility, but in nitrogen, I think at this time, especially it's getting too late, at least in Georgia, there will be some other areas that may have a little bit of leeway, but all you're doing really, it's the availability is little, and you're kind of putting the odds against you on that part. So if you must fertilize, you know, try to address according to a soil test if potassium levels are important, or you know, deficient and so on. Mm-hmm. But nitrogen at this point, it's getting, or is late, or is getting late.
Okay, very good. Had another question come in. It's a very good question here. It says, can taking preventative steps for one problem lead to creating environments for other ones to thrive? And what can we do to minimize this? Specifically, I'm thinking about when it comes to irrigating to reduce drought stress, if that might create the environment in the foliage for a pathogen to thrive.
Yes, that's a good point. Especially, for example, in springtime, like when I say that, for example, in that low nitrogen, dollar spot, and maybe dry soils, everything is, you know, a balance that is not one way or the other. So, and what are you prone to more? And you have to be, because let's say you have a problem with dollar spot, but then you add too much nitrogen and so on, and then you predispose rhizoctonia. That could happen, but usually it's if you attend a proper, you know, in the normal way. What I'm saying, one is to excess, so don't go to excess and say, okay, I want to control the dollar spot only with nitrogen. Then that may be setting up for some other issues. But if I say, okay, I'm going to address that issue by putting in normal amounts of what is needed for that particular species, that particular variety, and so on, but I address again to, like, for example, no thatch and a relief compaction and things like that, and maybe, you know, helping you out to control rhizoctonia, for example. So again, I will avoid any large, you know, too much or too little. I don't know exactly how to say, but you know, those that you go too high or too low, then that will predispose to others. But usually they are specific. If you have an issue with dollar spot, that means that most of the time you have that other issue. That yes, you can be predisposed to others, but usually addressing the proper requirements for that species will suffice.
All right, we had one final question. This is another one of my questions, Alfredo. It's, since disease management is preventative, but most of us think kind of in a curative manner, in other words, you know, what to spray to solve an existing problem that we can visibly see. Can you point to a good reference on what to do and when to do it for various types of turf? And I'm thinking here that I'm pretty sure the UGA turf team in the counties have references that kind of tell you what to do and when to do it.
Yeah, exactly. One of those things. We actually have, probably in every disease that I had, that I talked today, we have publications, specific publications, specific timing, specific fungicide that you can use, and so on. Because that's exactly what we do. We do always a curative. But remember, if nothing of this in this seminar, remember the motto, for example, for real estate. And if you want to sell something, it's location, location, location. For disease, is prevention, prevention, prevention. So if you do, you're going to try to do whatever you can in order to avoid that disease, because the more you're doing curative, quotation marks, the farther you're going to get to where you were if you were doing it preventative. Remember, I showed you one application, but basically if it's already too late, then you have to go 3 times as much. So sometimes it's money, sometimes it's environment, sometimes it's the client non-satisfaction. Remember, if you are lawn care and you have that particular problem, if you can show that you are the best if the client sees the weed dying in front of their eyes. But disease, sometimes you do something that they don't see until next year. If you do something in the fall, they are not gonna do. They are not gonna see anything for November, December, January, February, and March. They will be doing something in the 6th month that you did something. But remember, if you don't do it right now, then you'll have more issues later on.
Had one final question here. When is the safest time to use tebuconazole, am I pronouncing that right?
Yes.
On Bermuda grass to avoid turf injury. The label says to be careful around dormancy time.
Yeah, tebuconazole is one of the DMIs. Usually use it, for example, tebuconazole, we only use it in golf courses and other areas, just looking in the label. But it's a good question. The DMIs have a growth regulation effect, but at this time, and you see, for example, torque and some others, if you do it basically when the nighttime temperatures are below, let's say 55 or so, and the daytime temperatures do not surpass, let's say, the 80s, usually it's fine. So label said, for example, in spring dead spot, if you wanted to go when the soil temperatures are around 55, 60, that should be fine. This is a kind of loaded question in the sense that I've done some trials in which a higher cut, it depends a lot. It seems to me that the ultra dwarfs are more susceptible than the normal. Let's say if you are high cut, it's normal fairway height or sport field height or even lawn care. They have more resistance, and depends on when you use. But in order for tebuconazole, in particular, it basically it's not too hot, and more importantly, to avoid any effect for that. So fall, kind of late fall, late fall would be pretty safe.
All right, I think that's going to be. I think that's going to do it.
I'm not sure if that particular question came from a golf course, for example. In that case, it's an ultra dwarf, and you kind of have to be a little bit more on that. But yeah.
What's the web address for what's your web address for the turf team, Alfredo?
Well, we don't have really. Well, we have if you go to georgiaturf.com, which is a mirror of what we did, it has all the information and all the people, and georgiaturf.com, which basically
is it GA Turf? Is it GA Turf or GEORGIA?
No, it's like Georgia, spell out Georgiaturf.
Okay.
.com, and that basically is the name for a mirror that goes to the for our team.
All right, I think that's going to do it, Alfredo. Really great talk, Alfredo. That was really good stuff there on diseases.
And we're here to help you out. You know my address and things like that, and we can go either to your county agent or we're here to help you out.
Yeah, just one comment here too, folks. Of those of you in the audience, you need to get by and see this new turf building. It's just it's a thing of beauty. And I guess they're going to dedicate it on tomorrow, aren't they, Alfredo? It's going to be a dedication.
Tomorrow, and for the last 2 days, I've been laying sod in some areas. So.
All right, folks, we're going to take a 5-minute break and go get yourself a cup of coffee. Go to the restroom if you need to, and we'll start back in about 5 minutes with Dr. Chavez. Thanks, Alfredo. Very good.
Thank you.